Jackson laughed hysterically, pointing at Carl's antique rifle, mocking its primitive design, entirely unaware that in hours that useless antiquated human relic would be jammed against the back of his head as he begged for his life. It started when Carl was assigned to a joint human-alien military outpost on Zephyrus in 2347, centuries after humanity spread to the stars. The outpost's mission was keeping regional peace and stability in the face of rising tensions between humans and the aggressive Malans. Upon arrival, Carl met his new mixed-species squad, including Jackson, a Malan officer who openly despised humans and their pathetic ancient tech. He zeroed in on mocking Carl's projectile rifle, a treasured family heirloom brought to Zephyrus, disdainfully calling it a worthless antique unfit for any real fighting. As Carl tried to settle into his role and not let Jackson's ridicule get under his skin, an intel report sent everyone scrambling. A rogue Malan faction planned to raid the outpost and steal advanced human weapons. If those fanatics got the tech, it could dangerously shift the power balance and ignite a catastrophic human-Malan war across the region. The stakes couldn't be higher. This brazen alien robbery had to be stopped at all costs. Jackson was forced to swallow his disgust and work with Carl and the human soldiers as they frantically prepared defenses for the impending high-stakes Malan assault on the outpost. Carl used the time to absorb intel about Malan culture and their sophisticated plasma weapons while sharing stories of Earth history and his cherished ancestral rifle. Little did anyone realize how crucial that pitiful primitive human gun would soon prove to be. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the outpost, and maybe the whole sector of space, would be decided in the next 24 hours. The Malan attack came swiftly and without mercy. Plasma bolts rained down on the outpost as Carl, Jackson, and their squad scrambled to defensive positions. The air sizzled with the heat of the alien weapons, the advanced tech easily chewing through the outpost's outer defenses. Carl ducked behind a barricade, his standard-issue plasma rifle humming in his hands. He popped up to take a shot, but his weapon sputtered and died, the power cell drained. "Damn it!" He slapped the rifle, but it was no use. It was dead. Jackson, crouched nearby, laughed harshly. "Not so useful now, is it, human?" He nodded to Carl's antique gun, still slung over his shoulder. "Might as well use that relic. It's all you've got." Carl gritted his teeth and unslung the old rifle. He had no choice. As the Malans advanced, he took careful aim and fired. The bullet struck a Malan soldier in the chest, and to everyone's shock, the alien went down. The Malans paused, confusion rippling through their ranks. That primitive weapon wasn't supposed to be a threat. Carl fired again and again, each shot finding its mark. The antique rifle packed a punch, the solid bullets tearing through the Malan's advanced armor. The enemy began to take cover, their advance slowing. It bought precious time for Carl's squad to regroup and counterattack. But the Malans adapted quickly. They focused fire on the human positions, their plasma weapons taking a heavy toll. Carl's squad was being cut to pieces. He looked to Jackson, expecting to see triumph in the alien's eyes, but instead, he saw grudging respect. Jackson gave Carl a curt nod. "Not bad, human, but we're not done yet." Side by side, the human and Malan fought, Jackson's plasma rifle and Carl's ancient gun blasting away at the enemy. They fell into a rhythm, Carl spotting targets and Jackson vaporizing them. For a moment, their past animosity was forgotten in the heat of battle. But then Carl saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of Malans had broken off from the main attack and were storming the armory. If they got their hands on the advanced human weapons stored there... He turned to Jackson. "The armory! We have to stop them." Jackson snarled. "You're right. Let's go." They gathered a few of their remaining squad members and raced to intercept the thieves. They reached the armory just as the Malans were breaking in. The leader of the raiders, a hulking warrior Carl heard Jackson call Zek, turned to face them with a sneer. In the close confines of the armory, Carl's rifle was in its element. He fired rapidly, driving the Malans back from the weapon racks. Zek roared in fury and charged at Carl, his plasma blade flashing. Carl ducked under the blow and slammed the butt of his rifle into Zek's face. The Malan staggered back, his blade clattering to the floor. But Zek wasn't finished. He drew a plasma pistol and fired point-blank at Carl. The shot went wide as Jackson tackled Zek from the side. The two aliens grappled fiercely, but Zek was too strong. He threw Jackson off and blasted him with the pistol. Jackson went down, a smoking hole in his chest. Carl saw red. He lunged at Zek, his rifle forgotten, and tackled the Malan to the ground. They struggled brutally, rolling across the floor. Zek's hand closed around a human plasma grenade on a nearby rack. With a triumphant roar, he kicked Carl away and fled, the grenade clutched in his fist. The armory was secure, but at a terrible cost. Carl staggered to Jackson's side, the alien's breath coming in ragged gasps. "You fought well, human," Jackson whispered. "Don't let Zek win." As reinforcements flooded into the battered outpost and medics rushed to tend to Jackson and the other wounded, Carl stared out at the battlefield, his teeth clenched. Zek was out there with a stolen human weapon, and that could spell disaster for both their species. He gripped his antique rifle tightly. No matter what it took, he would hunt Zek down and retrieve that tech. The fate of the outpost and perhaps the entire sector depended on it. As the dust settled from the Malon attack, Carl surveyed the wreckage of the outpost. Bodies littered the ground, both human and Malon. The air reeked of ozone and burnt flesh. He clutched his antique rifle, its wooden stock warm and familiar in his hands. "Porter!" a voice called. It was Commander Reeves, her uniform torn and singed. "We've got a situation. That bastard Zek got away with the prototype." Carl's stomach dropped. "Any idea where he's headed?" Reeves nodded grimly. "Intel suggests Naxos. It's a Milan-controlled hellhole, perfect for a rat like Zek to hide." "I'll go after him," Carl said without hesitation. "Not alone, you won't," came a weak voice. Carl turned to see Jackson limping towards them, a bandage wrapped around his chest. "I'm coming too." Reeves shook her head. "Absolutely not. You're in no condition." "With all due respect, Commander," Carl interrupted, "Jackson knows Malin territory better than any of us. We need him." After a tense moment, Reeves relented. "Fine, but you're taking a team. This isn't a solo mission." Within hours, Carl and Jackson had assembled a small strike force, a mix of humans and Malins, who'd proven their loyalty during the attack. They boarded a stealth shuttle, its sleek black hull designed to slip past enemy sensors. As they approached Naxos, Carl peered out the viewport. The planet was a swirling mass of toxic clouds, punctuated by the occasional flash of lightning. "Looks inviting," he muttered. Jackson grunted in pain as he shifted in his seat. "The atmosphere is the least of our worries. Naxos is run by crime lords and mercenaries. We'll be lucky to make it out alive." The shuttle shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, dodging automated defense systems. They touched down on the outskirts of the capital, a sprawling neon-lit metropolis that pulsed with illicit activity. Carl and Jackson made their way through crowded streets, passing aliens of every description. The air was thick with strange smells and the buzz of 100 languages. Jackson led them to a dingy bar, its windows covered in grime. "My contact should be here," Jackson whispered. "Let me do the talking." Inside, they found a wizened Malon hunched over a drink. Jackson conversed with him in low tones while Carl kept watch. After a tense exchange of credits and information, they had their lead. "Zek's holed up in the Crimson Fang compound," Jackson reported. "It's heavily guarded, but I think I know a way in." They regrouped with their team and formulated a plan. Using a combination of human stealth tech and Milan codes, they bypassed the outer defenses of the compound. But as they entered the main building, alarms blared. "So much for the element of surprise," Carl muttered, raising his rifle. Mercenaries poured into the hallway, their plasma weapons lighting up the air. Carl's antique rifle cracked repeatedly, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Beside him, Jackson unleashed a barrage of energy bolts, the two working in perfect sync. They fought their way deeper into the compound, leaving a trail of unconscious and dead mercenaries in their wake. Finally, they reached a heavily reinforced door. "This is it," Jackson panted. Zek's in there. Carl nodded, reloading his rifle. Let's finish this. They breached the door to find Zek hunched over a workbench, the stolen prototype glowing with an ominous energy. The rogue Malin spun, his eyes widening at the sight of Carl and Jackson. You're too late, Zek snarled, raising the modified weapon. With this, the Malons will crush humanity once and for all. Carl raised his rifle, lining up his shot. Not if I have anything to say about it. The room erupted in chaos as Carl and Zek opened fire, their weapons representing a clash of old and new, human and Malon. The fate of two species hung in the balance as the firefight raged on. The prototype weapon hummed with dangerous energy as Carl secured it to his back. He glanced at Jackson, who stood guard at the door, plasma rifle at the ready. Time to go, Carl said. They moved swiftly through the compound's corridors, dispatching the few remaining mercenaries. As they reached the exit, a deafening rumble shook the building. Carl's eyes widened as he saw a massive Malon warship descending from the toxic clouds. Shit, Jackson hissed. That's a Dominion-class battlecruiser. Dozens of Malon troops poured out of the ship, led by a towering figure in ornate armor. The alien's voice boomed across the compound. This is Commander Kresh of the Malon Defense Force. Surrender immediately or face annihilation. Jackson's face paled. Kresh? Here? He turned to Carl. We're in trouble. Kresh is one of our top military leaders. Carl gripped his rifle tighter. Can we reason with him? Jackson hesitated, then nodded. Let me try. They emerged from cover, hands raised. Kresh's troops trained their weapons on them as Jackson called out. Commander Kresh, we're on the same side. We've recovered the stolen prototype. Kresh's eyes narrowed. Jackson? What are you doing with this human? Sir, we worked together to... Silence! Kresh roared. You dare betray your own kind by consorting with humans? Hand over the weapon and surrender, traitor. Carl watched as Malin soldiers encircled the compound. Every exit was cut off. He leaned close to Jackson and whispered, We need a plan, fast. Jackson nodded imperceptibly. I'll create a diversion. You take the prototype and run. Before Carl could protest, Jackson sprinted toward Kresh, shouting, I can explain everything. Carl didn't waste the opportunity. He dashed for a side alley, prototype in tow. Plasma bolts sizzled past him as he ran. The sound of combat erupted behind him. Carl risked a glance back and saw Jackson locked in fierce hand-to-hand combat with Kresh. The two Malons traded blows with inhuman speed and strength. Carl skidded to a halt. He couldn't leave Jackson behind. Raising his antique rifle, Carl took careful aim. The first shot took down a Malon soldier rushing Jackson's flank. The second blasted the weapon from another's hands. One by one, Carl picked off Kresh's men. Each crack of his rifle sent another alien sprawling, but Kresh was a juggernaut, shrugging off Jackson's attacks and pressing forward relentlessly. Carl saw his opening. As Kresh raised his plasma cannon for a killing blow, Carl's bullet struck true. The weapon exploded in Kresh's hands, sending him staggering backward. Jackson seized the advantage, lunging at the stunned commander. The two Malons grappled furiously, cybernetic enhancements whirring as they fought for dominance. Carl provided cover fire, keeping Kresh's reinforcements at bay. But more Malon troops were pouring in by the second. They needed to end this now. With a roar of effort, Jackson managed to pin Kresh to the ground. Carl rushed forward, rifle trained on the Malon commander's head. It's over, Kresh, Carl said. Call off your men. Kresh snarled in defiance, but a series of explosions rocked the compound. Carl's team had returned, laying down suppressing fire from their stealth shuttle. Time to go, Carl shouted. He and Jackson sprinted for the shuttle, prototype in hand. Malon reinforcements swarmed after them, plasma bolts lighting up the toxic air. They dove into the shuttle as its engines roared to life. As they lifted off, Carl saw Kresh bellowing orders to his troops. More Malon ships were incoming. Their escape was far from certain, but they had a fighting chance. Carl clutched his rifle, ready for whatever came next. One thing was clear. This battle was just getting started. Carl and Jackson sprinted through the chaotic compound, their lungs burning as they gasped for air in the toxic atmosphere of Naxos. Plasma bolts sizzled past them, scorching the ground at their feet. The prototype weapon bounced against Carl's back with each stride. "There!" Jackson shouted, pointing ahead. Their stealth shuttle materialized through the haze, its sleek form a beacon of hope. But between them and freedom stood a monstrous Malon battle mech, its massive frame dripping with weaponry. Carl dove behind a pile of rubble as the mech's plasma cannons roared to life, superheating the air. He peered out, assessing the situation. The mech's gunners were exposed, a fatal flaw in its design. "Jackson, I'll draw their fire. Get ready to move." Carl shouldered his antique rifle and took aim. The first shot cracked out, punching through the faceplate of a gunner. The alien slumped over his controls. Carl worked the bolt, chambering another round. 2 more shots, 2 more gunners down. Jackson seized the opportunity, sprinting from cover to cover. His fingers flew over a data pad as he closed in on the mech. "Almost there," he grunted over the comm. "Keep them busy." Carl obliged, methodically picking off more of the mech's crew. But his ammunition was running low. He counted his remaining rounds. Just 6 left. A triumphant shout from Jackson. "I'm in their systems. Primary weapons offline. Now!" The mech's cannons fell silent. Carl switched targets, aiming for the joints and propulsion systems Jackson had highlighted on his HUD. Each shot found its mark with pinpoint accuracy, crippling the war machine's mobility. As Carl's final round left the chamber, Jackson unleashed a concentrated plasma burst from his rifle. The mech's weakened armor buckled under the assault. With a deafening groan of tortured metal, the behemoth toppled. Their path clear, Carl and Jackson raced for the shuttle. But their elation was short-lived. A massive shadow fell over the landing zone as a Malon cruiser descended from the roiling clouds above. The air itself seemed to ignite as the cruiser opened fire. Carl and Jackson weaved through the barrage, the ground erupting around them. They were so close, just a few more meters to the shuttle ramp. A blinding flash, a scream of pain. Carl turned to see Jackson stumbling, the prototype weapon slipping from his grasp. Blood seeped from a vicious plasma burn on his chest. Carl's mind raced. The cruiser was targeting them, drawn by the prototype's energy signature. In that moment, he knew what had to be done. He scooped up the prototype, its weight suddenly oppressive. "I'm sorry, old friend," he whispered. With all his might, he hurled the weapon away from the shuttle. The cruiser's guns swiveled, tracking the prototype's arc. Carl seized his chance, grabbing Jackson and hauling him towards the shuttle. They collapsed onto the ramp as it began to close. Carl held Jackson's broken body, feeling the life drain from his unlikely ally. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, he caught a final glimpse of his trusty rifle lying in the dirt, a relic of Earth's past that had saved them in humanity's uncertain future. The shuttle punched through Naxos's atmosphere, leaving behind the chaos of the battlefield. Carl looked down at Jackson's lifeless form, the weight of their sacrifice settling over him like a shroud.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.